You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Well, good evening, folks. It's a return to the Voice of Reason with Michael Murphy after actually several months off the air. I hope you get a chance to take a listen to this. We're going to try to get into some neat stuff this evening. It's been an interesting ride here the last several months. Life gets in the way, and I just, something had to go, and so I dropped the radio bit for a little while because it was just... it takes a lot of time to set up for this, and plus the time recording it and all, and so to do the right job, I decided I just needed to kind of back off of it for a little bit. Our business picked up a lot. We have a bed and breakfast. It picked up a lot, and so we were very busy at home. Kids, life, grandkids, holidays, all that stuff. Lanterns have been after me to pick this back up, and everything seemed like every time I turned around, something new was happening and kept pushing it back. Had a chance to go to CPAC, which was a lot of fun, and hope you got to read some of the articles I wrote there, and that you got to listen to some of the interviews that the guys did. It was a pretty good time. But anyway, we're going to try to get back into the groove here and make it a weekly hour for you and see how it works out, and hopefully we can kind of make that last. I was just as I was preparing to record this, I saw that the United States had dropped, as they called it, the mother of all bombs on ISIS, and I thought that was kind of interesting. See if I can find it here real quick. It was it's a huge bunker buster. And they said as things have happened, have progressed there, that ISIS has gone more underground and gotten a little bit more on the defense and all like that. And so they were taking the opportunity to, evidently they had some good intelligence to where some of these people were, so they dropped this thing that's the equivalent of like 11 tons of TNT. It's the largest non-nuclear weapon that the U.S. has in its arsenal. I can imagine. I've seen some demonstrations of it in video. You ought to look that up sometime. It's quite impressive. But you wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of it, that's for sure. As we get going here, I wrote an article here recently called "I Just Can't Take It Anymore." And I can't take it any longer. How's that? Don't even know my own article. Anyway, I think a lot of us have gotten in the situation here with, the fake news, and not only fake news is just wrong. There just aren't hardly any good journalists anymore. When you look around, I see maybe James Rosen and certainly Cheryl Atkinson are a couple that come to mind that really are good journalists. They go out and they look hard for the truth, and they don't care where the chips fall. They don't seem to have a dog in the hunt, so to speak, and so they get out there and they just work really hard, trying to uncover the truth. Most news is just parroted. Somebody breaks a story somewhere or another, and then everybody else just copies what they have and throws it out there. And if it's wrong, as is mostly the case, we just end up with a bunch of garbage out there, and you don't know what to believe. And so that just really kind of creates a problem, and that kind of led to my article that I wrote, where I said I just can't take it any longer. It's an interesting situation we find ourselves in this country. With the freedoms we have, we also need increased personal responsibility. And honestly, I just don't see that very much anymore. The media feels no responsibility to their core job of reporting the truth. The people really don't see any need to, vet out and see what's, what they're getting is accurate or not. Journalism and the media in general, how do they keep going? They keep going with your dollars. You buy the things that they advertise, and the advertisers advertise on their shows, and the money flows. And as long as that works, then they have no reason to change. Personally, I just don't hardly watch any news anymore, and it's very unusual for me because I used to have news on, and pretty well it was Fox News, 24/7. I turned it on in the morning, and it was on whether I was really watching it or not. The TV was on, and I'd wander through, and it would be on, and I'd stop and listen for a little bit, and I just began to figure out over time that I was just being fed a bunch of stuff, and in most cases it either wasn't true, or things were left out, or it was a partial truth, and it just really leads to a lot of frustration. And I think, frankly, a lot of the angst that was displayed in the presidential race this last year is a direct result of that. People are just fed up with it, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know where to turn, and that's a very frustrating position to be in. I do. It's not that I'm uninformed. I do search for news and what's going on, but I primarily look at search around for headlines and breaks of stories and stuff like that, and then I search for the details and try to avoid any of the added in information that a reporter or a journalist feels the need to throw in there. Most reporters are not really reporters, they're commentators. And I make no bones about it. I would be a terrible reporter because I have a tough time taking my ideals and core beliefs out of things. And of course, my ideals and my beliefs are 100% correct, and so it wouldn't be any problem if I did share those. Just kidding, of course. As I wrote this article, I just, I looked through here and I said, it's a situation that I think our republic is in desperate situation. I know a lot of people felt like it was going to be the end of the world if Hillary Clinton was elected, and that when Donald Trump was elected, that the end of the world suddenly went out of sight. It just dropped off over the edge of the horizon, and everything's going to be hunky-dory until the next Democrat gets elected. And I'm here to tell you, I'm glad Donald Trump is, in many cases, his main thing was, for most people, that he was not Hillary Clinton. And, that's the way it is. I was listening today to some talk about some of the issues. In reality, most people, when it boils down to it, they voted for Donald Trump over the immigration issue, and that's it. That's why he was elected. Most of the stuff that he's said he was going to do, people really don't care if he does them or not. When it gets right down to it, if he takes care of the immigration situation, they're happy. I'm very pleased with Neil Gorsuch. It's a great pick, but time will tell. I thought John Roberts was a great pick too. So we lots of times don't know these things for many years down the road. So anyway, I was as I was looking over my history of my writing career and being involved in politics, I'm terribly frustrated over the ignorance that exists in the general public. They really do everything based on feelings. And I noticed that primarily with the progressives for a long time. The progressives just everything's based on feelings, and doesn't matter whether something's constitutional or not. Well, I've discovered, certainly in this election cycle, that there's an awful lot of so-called conservatives and people who I thought maybe were more constitutionalists seem to be more based on feelings than anything else. If I want something because it feels good and it happens to be constitutional, well, then that works out. But if I'm doing it for the feeling and not because it's the right thing to do, then it's real easy to get yourself off on a tangent. And that's a difficult situation we find ourselves in. And I got to tell you, when you look at what's going on around the world, if you look at what's going on in Syria, there's people who will say, "Oh, nothing's going to happen there," and you look at what's North Korea. No, China's going to step in. They're going to take care of that. No, Kim Jong-un's not going to push a button and do anything crazy. Deep down inside, he knows he can't. I'm telling you, we just don't understand how naive we can be. The mess in the Middle East is all created by the West. That was just a tribal area that was being run by the Ottoman Empire. We wanted to break the Ottoman Empire up so that they wouldn't have any power, and we drew boundaries in there so that we made countries where there'd never been countries, and we installed leaders where there'd never been leaders, and we're reaping the benefit, or the consequence rather, of those decisions. The Sykes-Picot line that was drawn has been a bone of contention for those people ever since it was drawn, and they're gonna fight over it, and they're not going to be happy about it as long as it's there. We can be upset with Assad, say, "Oh, he's a brutal dictator." Well, he's a brutal dictator that the West put in power. So whose fault is it? I don't know. It's a situation there's no easy answers to. We can gripe about it, we can talk about it, but in the bottom line, nothing's going to change it in the big scheme of things. We're just going to keep pushing the can down the road, and one of these days the can's going to blow up. I don't know what else to tell you. So anyway, I kind of made a decision as a result of that. I'm kind of staying out of a lot of this day-to-day politics stuff. I have my opinion, but there are 500 or 1,000 other radio people that have their opinion, and probably 10,000 writers and maybe 1 million Facebook posters that have their opinion. I don't stick out in that. There's nothing to make anybody listen to me or anything like that. So I've just decided maybe I'll have a little bit better chance of making a difference if I just kind of step back and get into some of the core things. I believe that most of the problems in our republic are core issues, and we spend a lot of time messing around on the perimeter of it, yet we don't get to the core issue. It's kind of like having a cut artery that's spurting blood out across the room, and but we've got a scrape on our leg, and we've got a sticker in our foot, and so we doctor the scrape and we pull out the sticker and we deal with that stuff. But we've got this severed artery that's spurting blood out, and nobody even pays any attention to it, and that's terribly frustrating to me. I'm a retired airline pilot, and we're going to get into that here a little bit later. But there's causes and effects, and it's rarely one big event that causes anything. It's generally a combination of things, and that's what we've got in our country. We don't have one big event. It was not Barack Obama. It was not George W. Bush. It's not going to be Donald Trump. There are core issues that are going on with our country, and until we address those core issues, nothing's going to change. And the progressives are going to be very happy about that, because the progressives have us going down that progressive road. And until we can break that track, or whatever it is that we're on, and get off that track and get back over where we belong, our squabbling and everything like that doesn't do anything. It just keeps us going down that track to progressivism, and of course progressivism is nothing but socialism and communism rolled up into a little bit. It's lipstick on a pig. How's that? Okay. Anyway, we're going to press on here a little bit. The UAL incident and the doctor. I'm going to take just a short break, get a drink here, and we are going to pick up with that here in just a second. Well, I tried to start some music and it didn't start. I have trouble with that once in a while, and I'm not sure what the deal is. So we're just gonna press on. I'm gonna take the drink while you're listening. What else can I do? Okay, as I said, I'm a retired airline captain, and actually I flew for United. There's a lot of dynamics when it comes into this this story with this doctor and United. As I step back to the previous discussion about the news, you understand that most of the news you've heard is probably an error. Probably every meme that you've seen out there is wrong. We like to grab these things and run with them, and we think we know what we're talking about, and we really don't. This story is no different than most of the others that you see when the news gets it wrong, and yet for some reason or other we believe what we want to believe, and we scream about what we don't want to believe. And in reality, the news is very consistent. It's wrong most of the time. So let's kind of take a look at this a little bit. First of all, you need to understand that, well, in the 1970s, airlines were deregulated, and that is kind of a misnomer because airlines are probably regulated. I imagine banking is the only thing that's regulated more than airlines. It's a tremendous amount of regulation. What it meant by being deregulated is they used to regulate where airlines could fly, and they quit doing that, and they let the open market determine who flew where and when and that sort of thing, and that actually led to quite an explosion in the airline industry. Those of you who are older may recall back in the 60s and 70s, you didn't fly anywhere unless you were flying to a funeral. Airlines were pretty well for business people, and it was expensive. And now airlines are relatively inexpensive. When I flew to CPAC here a while back, as a retired pilot, I can fly basically for free, although I fly what they call standby. And standby means that I sit there and wait to see if there's an empty seat. And it also goes by priority after that. So if there's somebody with more seniority or whatever ahead of me and there's an empty seat, they go and I stay. And so if you kind of need to get somewhere and you kind of need to get home, you're really better off to buy a ticket. And in reality, I think it was $340. I bought a round-trip ticket. If I got stuck, going and coming, trying to get there with my free ticket, I'd spend that much in meals and hotel. So in the long scheme, it was a lot better for me to just buy a ticket. There was a deal with United, in fact, here fairly recently about two young girls who got asked to change their clothes or not ride, and that made a lot of news, and a lot of people got upset. How dare airline? United doesn't have any right to tell people how to dress or whatever, and that's true. If you're buying a ticket, as long as you're not being obscene, I suppose. If you walked up there buck naked, they would not allow you to fly, but they don't control what you wear. But these two young girls, or I think there were three of them actually flying together, were all flying on employee passes. They were riding for free. And part of the price, so to speak, that you pay for that free ticket is that you have a dress code you have to comply with. There's no jeans, no tennis shoes, no shorts, and things like these leggings that they were wearing, which can be, although they cover your body, are quite revealing. It was just something that doesn't fit into the dress code, and so they were told they either needed to change or not ride. And that was once again something that was taken by somebody who was on the side, overheard this, and they start posting it on Facebook, and next thing you know, it's a big deal. In reality, it was those young girls. It was either their fault or whoever gave them the tickets did not explain it to them. And that's all part of That's all part of the deal. So as we get to this incident with the doctor, we have to understand kind of what's going on here. We've got the I figured out all of a sudden while I'm talking there, I figured out why I couldn't hear my music a while ago. Anyway, as we pick up on this deal with the doctor, there's a lot of information here that is inaccurate, and we're going to talk about some of that here in a minute. And I'm going to go ahead and play some of that music and get another drink. Okay, I'm back. I really like that music. I like that instrumental stuff like that. Anyway, back to the United Airlines and the doctor. There are some things that are going on here. First of all, it was not handled properly by United. I don't think that United. But what a lot of people don't understand is we've got to look at the whole picture here. First of all, airport security. We had this little thing, you may have heard about it, was in the news, called 9/11, and airport security changed quite a bit. So when we get to dealing with people who are not complying with federal law enforcement, which airport security may not be technically federal, but because they work under the auspices of the FAA and under their regulations and requirements and everything, they are sort of de facto federal agents. So if you've been asked to leave an airplane for whatever reason and you refuse to leave, you're kind of putting them in an awkward situation because they've got a job of taking care of stuff. Now, backing up just a little bit here, United, as I understand, offered $400 for people, and maybe this was a little bit unusual because in a lot of cases I think these people were already seated on the aircraft. And so that adds a little bit of a different situation to it. But they asked for $400. Nobody took it. $800, and I think a couple of people took it, but then they still needed more. And I don't guess they upped the ante at all. A lot of people don't understand. They say, well, why didn't they just offer more and more and more? And I think they should have offered more. In the big scheme of things, it would have been a lot cheaper than what's happening. However, there is a limit on what they can offer. Once again, regulated by the federal government. You and I would think, well, okay, we'll offer $1,000, we'll offer $1,200, we'll offer $1,500, I'll offer $2,000. I'll get to a point to where somebody will take that and open up some seats. Actually, the federal government will not let United Airlines or any airline do that. Now, when you buy an airline ticket, there's a lot of fine print. Whether you do it online or whether you buy the ticket, a paper ticket, at the airport, there's a lot of fine print. And when you sign for that ticket, you're basically saying, I accept. How many times have you gone to do something online and it says, before you can go any further, you have to accept our policies. And then there's this line of about 50 pages of fine print. And, of course, you read every bit of it, and then, sometime 3 days later, you are able to click I agree. No, none of us do that. We just click I agree and we go on. And yet that I agree is a legally binding agreement. So part of that agreement is that in certain circumstances you can be asked to give up your seat. And by saying that you agree or by signing on the dotted line, you're agreeing that you're willing, that you understand that and that you're willing to do it. In this particular situation, I do not know the exact situation with this crew that had to go, But as I said, I'm a retired captain with United, and I've actually been in this situation on a couple of occasions. And one time, people were removed to put me on an airplane. You have to understand that if I don't go, the flight that they're taking me to has to cancel. And so now, instead of a couple of people being inconvenienced, maybe 150 have been inconvenienced. So these things are kind of like, once again, this is all regulated by the government. In a must-fly situation, this allows the airline, or makes the airline, however you want to put it. So even if people have boarded, this was not an oversold situation. An oversold situation is where, you've got 100 seats on the airplane, you sell 110 seats, and 102 people show up. Well, now you've got 2 extra people, and you're going to have to make a deal. That's one thing. That's not what happened here. The seats were full. There were no more passengers, but this crew had to get there. It was an evening flight. It's very likely there were no other flights that evening that could get the crew there. No other way to accommodate things, and this is an FAA regulation thing. That crew has to be taken. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So the airline's in a situation where they've got to take care of this. They use an algorithm. You say, well, did they just pick this guy because he was an Asian looking fellow, or what happens? Obviously not. People are picked because they happen to have a certain situation with their seat. Maybe they didn't pay very much for it. Maybe they booked it a long time ago, and I don't know what all the algorithms are that come into play here, but people are picked not just at random, but they're picked on an algorithm based on several factors. So this man was picked, and he didn't want to go. And so when the TSA or airport security or whoever it was shows up, now they've got to deal with this. What do they do when he refuses to go? I mean, the airline is bound by law to pick somebody. They picked somebody. The guy doesn't want to go. Now, once again, I'm saying that United should have upped the ante. I know the limit is $13.50. They should have gone to the limit, and then if they didn't have any takers, they would have a better leg to stand on. And to my understanding, they did not do that. My initial thought was, well, the police were kind of rough handled this guy, and so there's a difficult situation there, and maybe they shouldn't have jumped the gun on it and done everything so bad. But then when the truth comes out, the guy had left the aircraft. They took him out. He broke free of them, ran back, and got on the airplane. Now, in this day and age, you think about this. In this day and age, when somebody runs into a secure area and runs onto an airplane, is law enforcement just going to go, let's let him go, he's upset? No, now you've escalated that thing into a major situation. Maybe there were some mistakes made all the way around here, but the doctor is not without fault here. And I think people need to kind of take some pause and realize the fact that he certainly was in the wrong. I mean, he was behaving quite immaturely. I'm not going to get into. I've heard all sorts of things about his history as a doctor and stuff like that. It's sort of immaterial here, and I'm not going to go there. The bottom line is that it's a situation where he did not handle it well either. So we've got 3 entities, actually 4, involved here. We've got United Airlines, we've got law enforcement, we've got the federal government, and we've got the doctor. The federal government, if you guys read my stuff, we've got to have a government, but we don't have to have this government. This government is way, way, way too big and intrusive. As an airline captain, I can tell you right now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell you most of this stuff is for public consumption. If somebody really wants to get something in there, they're going to get it in there. They're just not going to walk through the front door. So, it's a situation where they're spending a tremendous amount of money inconveniencing people just unbelievably. And to what end? It just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, we're looking at all this deal, and we've got this we've got the federal government here, setting up the rules, but that we all have to play by. And so you've got United and the doctor, and you got the federal government and law enforcement, and people did not, nobody behaved properly. So don't just jump all over United Airlines. It's not the only thing going on there. We're going to take a little bit of a break here, and we'll pick things up here shortly.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Well, welcome back. We're going to pick up here a little bit where we left off in relation to talking to some of this information about the airline. I've had some interesting things happen over the years with in relation to the airline. I've been taken off an airplane before because of whatever reason, not because I was kicking and screaming or anything like that, but there's been times when it was I learned there just wasn't room. And so rather than throw a fit, I just got off. I put on my big boy pants, and I got off, and I dealt with the situation, and I went on. I can tell you, I was a commuter my entire career. By commuter, I mean that my base of where I flew out of was I flew out of Miami, I flew out of New York, I flew out of Chicago, out of Denver, L.A., and San Fran in my career. And I never lived in any of those places. I lived in the Midwest, in the Texas Panhandle part of that time, and in Kansas part of the time. And I drove to whatever my local airport was, and I got on a plane and I flew. We were able to fly jump seat, and I was able to fly for free on other airlines as well as ours, and go to work. And so that adds quite a bit of a mess to getting to work, obviously, especially if I'm going like to L.A. I had to fly, say, out of Wichita to Denver or Phoenix or someplace like that, change airplanes, and then go on to Los Angeles. Adds a lot of time getting to work and everything like that. You have to factor in time to get plenty of rest before you go on your trip and all like that. So, but to me, it was a lot better than living in Los Angeles. And that's just me. If you saw where I lived, maybe you would agree, maybe you wouldn't. But the bottom line is there's been times I couldn't get on an airplane, and I didn't throw a fit. I got on the next plane and just took it from there. I have, in my years of traveling, have heard people talk about every airline there is and how horrible they are and how they're never going to fly on them again. In fact, I remember in particular one day I heard people talk about how bad United was. They were never flying on United again. And I heard people talk about American, how bad American was. They were never going to fly on American. And then about Delta and how bad Delta was. They were never, ever going to fly on Delta again. And so typically what happens, I think, is people get mad. They leave one airline, they go to another, and they fly on them until they get mad with them. And then they go on to the other. What they forget about is that life's not perfect. You're dealing with people. And it's certainly, in the airline industry, you're dealing with weather and so many factors like that. Add in the government regulations and things like that. There are times, there were a couple of situations in which weather stretched out our day to the point to where we were going to be illegal to fly our last leg, and so we couldn't take the trip. And so you get people all upset about that. Well, those regulations are put in there for your benefit. I may have been too tired to fly it. I may not have. It didn't really matter. For me personally, I would like to think, well, I can look at the situation, because there's times when I haven't put in near as long a day and I'm tired and maybe I'm a little bit unsafe, but legally I can go and I have to go. And there's maybe times when I've flown as much as I'm allowed, but I'm feeling fine and I could go on a couple, 3 more hours. So the problem is the government doesn't let us make our own decisions. The government makes all of our decisions for us. And so we find ourselves in a situation where we're looking at the regulations and deciding what we can and can't do. And it just gets to be an awkward deal, So when you're dealing with, you throw the passengers into the mix, people are upset. They've had a bad day at work. They're just any number of things can affect how they're behaving and what they want to do and how they take to the situation. There's just too many variables in it for it to be a very simple thing and with simple solutions. And add to the fact that there's really are a lot of people that are really do not like the airlines. I mean, the airlines is a business everybody loves to hate, kind of airlines and banks both. And maybe it's because the government regulates them both so heavily. Maybe that's why. I don't know. You'll keep getting that theme from me quite often. The government is too intrusive and too controlling. Anyway, I've seen situations, like that. I witnessed a a thing on Southwest Airlines one time that was really kind of interesting. There was a fellow was being a little bit there. I was riding jump seat on Southwest, and I was waiting out in the jetway. It's just sort of the thing that you do when you're riding like that. You wait till the airplane has been completely loaded. If there's any seats left in the back, you're usually welcome to seat in the back. If the seats fill up, then you go take the jump seat in the cockpit. And so I was waiting out on the jetway, and there was a passenger on board, evidently, that was upset that he wasn't able to get the seat that he wanted. And if you're familiar with Southwest, they don't have assigned seating. So if you get there late, or you're one of the later ones to board, then you may not get the seat you want. So this guy was being a little bit rude to the flight attendant and was just being kind of obnoxious. So the flight attendant called the customer service rep from up the counter, who came down, and they asked the guy to come off the airplane and talk to him, and he did. He came out there and talked to him, and he was rather belligerent with the customer service agent as well. And I'm sitting here watching this, and I'm thinking this guy's really messing up, because they gave him every opportunity to swallow his pride and say, you know what, I'll just, it's okay, I'll deal with it. But he was insistent that he get what he wanted. And so because of the way the regulations are, and the regulations are there, by and large for safety, if you start off a trip with somebody who is not cooperative, there's a mindset there, so that let's say there's an emergency in flight. This passenger already has a mindset that they do not want to cooperate with that flight attendant. And in a dangerous situation, that lack of cooperation can cost lives. And so it's the sort of thing that we have to step back and think, well, the guy was just irritated. Well, true. But it was a situation also to where if lives counted, it could also kill people. So anyway, this guy was given every opportunity, and he kind of stayed belligerent. And so the customer service agent said, do you have any carry-ons on board? He said, yeah, I do. He says, go get them. He says, what do you mean? He says, go get your carry-ons. He says, and come with me. He says, you're not going on this flight. He says, I got to go on this flight. No, you're not going on this flight. He says, there's a flight that leaves in an hour and a half, and we'll put you on that one. But I've got to go on this one. Well, he said, you could have gone on this one had you complied, but you've decided to not comply, and so therefore you're not going. And you can see the guy kind of deflated, but he really had no leg to stand on, because he knew that he had been a little bit crass and a little bit unreasonable. And so it's one of those things I've seen a lot of instances like that, and it's just the sort of thing that people just don't think about when you look at this situation, like I said, what happened with this doctor was asked to leave. Okay? The doctor says, no, I'm not leaving. Now we've got a situation here where we've got a passenger who does not want to comply with a crew member. Now, the crew members are there. You may think the flight attendant is there to serve you pretzels and cookies and soft drinks and coffee. No, that's what they do because they're not busy saving your life at the moment. Okay? Their job is to save your life. My job as a pilot is to get you from point A to point B in a safe manner, and if something goes wrong in the middle of that, to save your life, sort of like Captain Sully did. Okay, he made a split-second decision, and he saved everybody. Now they second-guessed him, till the cows came home. But the bottom line is when those things happen, you have seconds to make those decisions, while everybody else has the following days, weeks, and years to second-guess your decision. This is the same sort of thing. We've got a passenger now. This doctor has decided, I'm not going to comply. Now, at no time did the United Airlines personnel rough him up or get rough with him or grab him or touch him or do anything. This was all law enforcement. Now, maybe they could have done something to defuse this a little bit, but the bottom line is it escalated into an out-of-control situation. But like I said, we've got a passenger here who has said, I will not comply. He's telling them right up front, I will not comply with your wishes. So what do they have to take from that? They have to take from that if I'm in flight and there's an emergency and I want this guy to do something, he's not going to cooperate. That's the only solution. That's the only conclusion that you can come to. So you have to understand that this is a life and death situation. Jets are very reliable. We don't have airplane crashes very often, and most of the time it's not because of failure of the airplane. It's because of a number of incidents. Failures of the airplane generally are very handled fairly well. I can tell you a number of instances where airplanes failed, engines quit, all sorts of things happened, and everybody landed and everybody was happy, and nobody was hurt. So it's not just a matter of that right there. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind as you're listening to these things, as you see these memes. As a retired United pilot, I look at these memes that show United flight attendants dressed up in leather jackets and carrying baseball bats and things like that. It shows a real lack of understanding of what really happened, and it's also a shortfall on the media for just going with the sensational. They're once again they're selling stuff. I no longer buy what they have to sell, so it's up to you to make your own decisions in relation to that. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break here, and we'll pick up this here a little bit, and we'll close out the show here shortly. And welcome back. So, talking about airlines and how everybody loves to hate airlines. We just have those situations, don't we, where we have these things that we just love to hate. You talk to people about what's your favorite car. Oh, some guy, they'll argue over Ford, Chevy, Dodge, Toyota, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The bottom line is you like what you like and you don't like what you don't like, and lots of times the facts don't really matter. We like them for different reasons and things like that. I know United Airlines is not a perfect airline. And that's largely because it's run by imperfect people, and they employ imperfect people. And in the big scheme of things, guess what? Every other airline does too. So we have a tendency here seems like in recent years, to just be spring-loaded to outrage. Our ability to show some compassion and be thoughtful seems to have fallen off the edge of the earth. I don't know what it's going to take to get that back. Well, I kind of have an idea of what it's going to take, and it's not going to be pretty. I honestly believe that this country is going to have to go through a very difficult and bad time where people get a serious wake-up call, where they realize that the government's not always their friend, the government can't always help them and do everything for them, and that they're going to have some ability and self-reliance and cooperation. We can't just get mad at everybody. We have situations, where I've got friends I've had a long time that I disagree with greatly politically, but they're still good friends. But when you look at Facebook and stuff, I just blocked so-and-so, I just unfriended so-and-so because they said this or that or whatever. That's how childish can you get? I'm sorry. My life needs a little bit more than just a one-sided input. I don't need people just saying attaboy all the time. In fact, we generally get stronger when we have to fight for our, and improve ourselves. Like I said, in my writing is taking a turn. I'm going back, trying to get back in a little bit more historical things. I'm working on with a chapter of an organization called Founders Keep. We're going to start a local chapter here, and we're trying to get back into some of the basics of the founding principles and the founders and what was their vision and what kind of people were these people. And that's kind of what the direction I've been going with some of my writing. I'd like you to take a look at one of my last articles called A Remarkable Woman. And there's a lady there named Nancy Hart. I'm going to try to pick out, as I write some of this stuff, I'm going to try to pick out some of the people that maybe you haven't heard of so much. I can't imagine how many people there are that were so pivotal and played such an important part in our founding, and yet we don't know about them. In many cases, I imagine there were things that were done that nobody knows about, and it's lost forever. But there are some things that are known, that things were written down, people talked about it, and so I want to try to bring some of those things out. And I think the important thing is that we need to recall, where we came from and who we are. As we do that, we're going to change what this country is. I wrote a novel. I wrote a novel back in 2012 called Spare Time. And Spare Time is like I said, it's a novel, and I try to, kind of make it an action novel. But the bottom line of it is that we all have things that we can do, and I know we're all busy. In our personal life here, my wife and I, we've always joked about if somebody says, "Hey, can you take care of that?" I say, "Yeah, I'll get that done in my spare time." We know we're saying that we're really busy, we don't have time to do it, and so we'll get it done in our spare time, and there is no spare time. And yet, for some reason or other, we also get it done. So the bottom line is we need to learn to set time aside to do the important things and to make an effort to be the people that we're supposed to be. The idea behind Spare Time is that we get more involved in our community and that we take an interest in our neighbors and that we do things for those who are in need. And we turn things around and we make, as I put it in the book, we make the government irrelevant. People would in most cases, would rather have a hand up than a handout. I realize that we're in a situation now where we've got generations of people who have been used to getting the hand up. The handout, and so their mindset is that way because they don't know anything else, because their mother did it and they're doing it and they're teaching their kids to do it. We need to break that cycle. Government will have to have a part in that, because as long as government just keeps handing it out, the cycle won't break. And of course, we're going to have a hand in that, in taking care of that. As we look at this situation with this, like I said, as we kind of go back to this United Airlines and the doctor thing, or whether we're talking about the news and how reporters are not journalists anymore, all this is related. All this goes down to a core value sort of thing of, am I who I'm said I am? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? And if what I'm doing, is it furthering my nation? Is it helping my community? Or is it just a selfish interest? And I'm not saying that we can't go around doing things we like. There's a lot of things I like. I like to hunt and fish. I like to shoot. I like to spend time with my grandkids, things like that. And those don't necessarily do anything for my community, other than the fact that maybe I'm teaching my grandkids to be, responsible adults. But the bottom line is we need to learn to take an interest in those about us. We need to have a little bit of compassion, and we need to be a little less spring-loaded to the sensational story. When the news of things like this pop out, do we immediately start sharing it and go, yeah, look at this, oh, those dang airlines, they need to go broke, they're no good. That bank, what that bank did to me? That bank needs to go out of business. We're sick of that. The bottom line is there's a core cause to that, is the fact that we have given up our liberty for security, something we were warned about. And we were told that if we did that we were going to soon find out that we had neither liberty nor security. I listened, just briefly as we close here, I listened to an interview today by a fellow who was a former KGB undercover agent here in this country. He came here during the Carter administration and was undercover for a number of years. He was East German and was brought in here basically spying for the Russians. And very interesting story. And we have to understand that when you come from a country like that, your formative years when you're young set the stage for the rest of your life. And we think from a standpoint of freedom and liberty. They don't. And we have to understand that as long as we're going down the path that we're going, we're soon going to find out that our children don't either. And so it's a dangerous situation we find ourselves in. He was saying that he sees more federal government involvement and state government involvement in controlling us and our children than what he ever saw in East Germany or in Russia. And that's a little bit scary to me. So I think we need to kind of, take a pause and quit jumping up and down and maybe start reflecting on some things. I don't know. I'm hoping to spend some time here in the coming weeks in this show and also in my writing. I hope I can interest you in coming along with me and taking a little bit of a different look and a little bit different take in what's going on in the world and how we got here, where we're going. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just very frustrated. And like I said, just briefly earlier, I think that we're facing some very serious times with what we've got going on around the world. Besides what we've going on here, in addition to our the world, like I said, the world events, as well as $20 trillion in debt and $140 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Anyway, I'm about out of time, and I'm going to let it run out with a little bit of music, and we will see you next week. Thanks a lot. This is Michael Murphy, the Voice of Reason.